Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my preview and prediction video for Sunday afternoon's game against the Houston Texans. Before we talk about that game, I do want to talk briefly about the Pro Bowl selections that the Eagles had. The Eagles obviously sending 3 guys to the Pro Bowl. And in all 3 of those cases, I think they're well-deserving players. Brooks might be the one possible exception of a guy who maybe got in a little bit more on reputation than actual play, but I think of all the guys in the line, he's probably been the most consistent year long. Some of the other guys have had some ups and downs, but obviously Ertz and Cox both well deserve it. I know there's a lot of Eagles fans out there that were upset that Malcolm Jenkins didn't get named to the Pro Bowl, but I've just got to say that I think he's had a fairly inconsistent year. The only thing you can really make the argument in his favor is the fact that he was sort of an island back there sometimes because the rest of the secondary was so banged up that he was playing with a bunch of guys that, were basically scrubs. So, from that standpoint, I can see why Eagles fans think he deserves to get in. But I thought he was, while still more good than bad, I still think he had a little bit of an inconsistent year, so I can understand why he didn't make it. And so all in all, I've got to say, I think the NFL got this one right for a change. I think the 3 guys that got in deserved it, and there's no one else that I can really see on the team that deserved it that didn't get in. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to Sunday's game. Interesting fact about the Texans, the Eagles have never lost to the Texans. Now, granted, they've only been in existence for 16 years. They've been around since 2002. So they haven't even had hit the 20-year mark. But we played them 4 times. We're 4-0 against them. That's obviously regular season. I don't remember if we would have played them in a preseason game and lost. But in terms of the regular season, we've never lost to them. There's only one other team in the NFL that we've never lost to. So the Texans are in rare company in the sense that we have never lost to them. So we're 4-0 against them, and the Eagles will try to keep that going on Sunday afternoon. So the question becomes, can we do that? And looking at this game, I've got some concerns as to whether or not we can do this or not. The one thing that jumps right out at me when I'm looking at their statistics, because like I said, I've really stopped sort of looking at our statistics right now because our statistics have been so up and down depending on who's been playing this year. Our defense might be a little bit better now than it had been, but right now our defensive statistics are terrible. And our offensive statistics obviously are for the bulk of the season with Wentz as quarterback, and now that Foles is quarterback, that obviously factors into it. Not just the fact that it's a different quarterback, but I think Doug Peterson calls a different game when he's in there. But if you look at their defense is sort of average when it comes to overall, below average when it comes to the passing. Where it's really scary is their running defense and their scoring defense. And I've noticed one thing about the NFL this year, and it's really no surprise when the league has gone to such a pass-happy league, that teams that generally are better in scoring defense generally are better in running defense as well. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that when you get down into the red zone, it's a lot harder to pass the ball because defenders don't have to worry about guys getting behind them as much because there's no place to go behind them. And so when you get into the red zone, you've got to have a good running game that the defense is going to respect. And if you've got a good run defense, that allows you to be a little more creative in the way you defend the pass in those situations. So I think all in all, teams that are better against the run as a rule have been better in scoring defenses as well. Looking at the other side of the ball, though, I think a lot of this comes down to the fact of whether Lamar Miller is going to play or not. Because if you look at their offensive statistics, you can see that their running offense is really good. And some of that's Lamar Miller. Some of it's also Deshaun Watson, frankly. But if you look at the rest of their offense, they're average to below average. So, when you look at all of those statistics together, I think it makes a big deal whether Lamar Miller plays in this game or not. And right now, as I'm making this video, he's still questionable and he's considered day-to-day. Now, the one stat that I think Eagles fans might have probably heard a lot about this week, and certainly is something that is favorable for us, is the Texans are dead last in sacks surrendered. They're 32nd in the league. They've given up more sacks than anyone else in the league. So Deshaun Watson is probably a guy who probably holds on to the ball a little bit more, maybe tries to run around, make some plays, and as a result, probably ends up getting sacked more than he needs to be. So that's, given the fact the way our defensive line played last week against Goff, if we can continue to dominate on the defensive line, that can really help us there. So that gives me, that's some good things that I think we could potentially have going for us. And then, of course, the other thing I'll always talk about is turnovers, and the turnover differential is way in favor of the Texans this year. It's because obviously I've been harping about this all year, but we've really struggled with turnovers. Got a little bit better after last week against the Rams. That's probably the main reason we won that game, is winning the turnover battle. If we can win the turnover battle against the Texans, then I think there's no reason why we can't win this game, because I think other than that, with where the fact that our defense is finally starting to get a little bit healthy, looks like Jordan Hicks might be coming back. With all of that stuff, I think we're good enough on defense to be able to hold them and ultimately, hopefully, score enough points on offense with what we have. All that said, though, I've got to say, I don't really like this spot for the Eagles. There's always a tendency when you have a big win like they did last week, a big emotional win, that there's usually sort of a letdown after that. That's also bared out in the fact that the statistics show that teams that win on the road as an underdog and come home as a favorite, which is the situation the Eagles are in, usually tend not to do well. So I think that also is sort of something that's in there is against them. And the fact that the Texans need this win just as much as the Eagles do, in the sense that the Texans are, they're playing to clinch their division. If they win, they'll clinch their division. And they also are trying to keep pace and keep a step ahead of the Patriots for a first-round bye. So the Texans have every reason to try and win this game, just like the Eagles do. So it's not going to be that one team's more desperate than the other, because both teams are desperate to win this game for their playoff lives. The Texans, if they really want to do something, I think need to have a first-round bye in this year. And the Eagles, obviously, if they want to make the playoffs, they've got to win both of their last two games. So like I said, I don't really like this spot. For that reason, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Texans to win this thing. It pains me to say it. This is picking with my head instead of my heart. My heart really wants to pick the Eagles in this game. I've been thinking about it all week. And yeah, I really wanted to pick the Eagles to win this game, but I can't do it given where everything's at. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Texans to win. My prediction for a score is going to be Texans 23, Eagles 19. I think the Eagles keep it close. Certainly wouldn't be surprised if we won this thing, especially if we're able to win the turnover battle, and especially if Lamar Miller doesn't play. So you factor all those things in, I could certainly see an Eagles win in this thing. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and pick against them. Maybe it's some reverse psychology, though, because right now, if I look at my predictions for this season, I've picked against the Eagles now 4 times before this one. The Eagles are 3-1 in those games. The only loss was the Saints game, which obviously I think everyone could see that coming. And on games where I've picked for the Eagles, they're 4-6. So right now, the Eagles have actually had better record in games that I picked against them than in games I picked for them. So maybe some reverse psychology going on in the back of my mind, and that's why I'm picking against them, but that's sort of what I think. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What's your prediction for this score? Also, do you have a guess on the trivia I mentioned at the top of the video, the fact that the Eagles have never lost to the Texans and one other NFL team? Leave in the comments below if you know who that other NFL team is. And obviously I'll check in after the game, let you know what I thought. Hopefully I'll be wrong and we'll be talking about the Eagles' continued trek to try and get into the playoffs. Until then, fly Eagles fly.